So you can see so far that the last sentence of both your first and your second, and maybe even your third paragraph, are talking about the employer, or at least reflecting back on the employer. Some advice that you might find online will say that you need a whole paragraph talking about why you want to work for that employer. I do not agree with that because you only have a few paragraphs, right? And so you don't want to spend that amount of real estate talking about them. But what you're doing through those last sentences of those first two paragraphs is showing that you do know about them and you know how you align and you know that you're the best choice for that role. So it already shows that you start at least starts to reflect on why you want to work there because you align with their values and what they want, right? But you'll get more into that just a tad here in the conclusion. So you'll start your conclusion with why them. So this person says, I've attended shows at your gallery since I moved to New York in fall 2014, and I've been continuously inspired by the diversity of materials and communities represented in each. I'm excited to join an organization so committed to being a part of, reflecting, and contributing to its community. Now, you might not have ever been to the employer that you are applying for a job with, but that's okay. You might say, from my research, I've seen that blah, 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 blah. Or from, seeing the catalog from your past exhibition, I blah, blah, blah. Or I've talked to someone who works with you or whatever it is, however you've gained your information about this company enough to decide you want to apply to work with them, or whoever it is. Say that, right? Say where you've gotten your information from and what about them makes you want to work there, just briefly. Then you're going to restate your thesis. So my experience in education, outreach, and management demonstrate a similar commitment to diversity, passion for, and knowledge of contemporary art and fitness for this role. And you see how in this example, they're tying back to that mission statement they just mentioned. And then your last sentence is just going to be the standard, thank you in advance for your consideration, and I look forward to hearing from you. And yes, you can use that exact wording if you want to. That's very standard, but I will have a couple more examples of last sentences. It doesn't have to be that, but it can be. Let's see. I feel like there's one more thing I wanted to say here, but it'll probably come back to me. Yeah, probably come back to me. All right, and then we will finish with every single letter, whatever letter, whether it's a letter of interest, cover letter, whatever, with a signature line. Your signature should be your handwritten signature written on a piece of paper, scanned, dropped into your document, and then your typed name underneath. And then this enclosure line. I never see this on real letters. This is sort of a technical thing that is good to add if you have the space, but I think because one page is so short, it's not a thing that people always include. So I'll say, if you have the space, please, include your list of enclosures at the end of your cover letter. If you do not have space, if it sends you onto the second page, then don't worry about it. All right. So a couple other things that you might mention in your job cover letter, and this is the longest one we're going to talk about before the other ones are not as verbose. But some things you could include if you wanted to. You can address any significant gaps you have in your career or any major career shifts that you've had. And these are things that people will often ask me, like, oh, should I mention this in my bio? Should I mention this? Should I somehow allude to this on my CV? No, if you are going to say anything about it, it's going to be in your cover letter. However, you don't have to, especially with career shifts, because sometimes career shifts are for personal reasons, and you don't ever have to divulge personal information about yourself just because there's a gap in your CV. So if you want to, because you feel like you need to, it's totally appropriate, but you don't feel like you have to. Career shifts, I say mention it if it's really recent. If you had a major career shift 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, you don't need to mention it. If it was a year ago, or even if this job would be a career shift, then for sure mention it. So it just depends on the proximity to the actual letter writing. If you do want to mention it because it was recent, the reasons are that you would mention it is you have to really make it clear through the words that you choose that the skills developed in a whole different set of duties for a whole different kind of job are still relevant for this new role. So that's why it needs to come up in your cover letter. The other thing that you might mention are any connections you have with the people that you're writing to. So if you've talked to someone already there, if you know somebody there that's referred you, if you've worked there before, you'll mention that. And that can go either in your background sentence in the first paragraph, or it could go in your final paragraph where you're talking about why them, that part. All right, so we'll go ahead and, let's look at one and then we'll pause for questions right after this. So this is a real world example that I've altered a little bit, but because I can't help myself. But you can see with this example, there is only one body paragraph. So it's just introduction, body paragraph, concluding paragraph, and then there's a hanging thank you line, which is fine to do if you want to do that. The first paragraph is the three-part structure that I presented to you. So I write to apply for the position of costume designer for your upcoming summer production, Thrilling Theater Production. And then in this particular letter, which I chose for this reason, because we're not really talking about how education figures into cover letters. If you're a recent graduate, this would be a good thing to mention, saying like, oh, I'm just about to graduate. I'm guessing that this person is mentioning it in this way because she's applying for a summer position and she's currently a student. So she's saying, by the time this job starts, I will have my degree in my hand, because maybe that's a requirement. Maybe they want someone with a bachelor's. People often ask me like, oh, should I mention my degree if it was a BS in chemistry? If the job posting says you need a bachelor's for this job, I would mention it. If they don't mention that they want a degree, then I wouldn't. I would leave that to my CV. And again, you might not even have it on your CV depending on what you're applying for. But yeah, if they say they want a bachelor's, I would mention it in your cover letter because you just want to check you want to use your cover letter to check all the boxes of the job call. So I think that's why she has that there. And then she has her thesis statement. My experience in design, both at Maryland Institute and in the Baltimore theater community. So she's showing, yeah, I've done all the college stuff, but I've also gotten out into the community a little bit and have some real world experience. Along with my knowledge of Todd Jones's work, who's the fictional playwright, make me an excellent fit for this role. So the second paragraph talks about the coursework that she's taken and the things that she's gleaned from it. It also talks about the opportunities that she's had sort of in the real world community. And then the last paragraph, and she has that sort of last sentence of the second paragraph that brings it back to them. My record of success in design and in managing a team well prepare me for the requirements of this position. And I wanted to note with that sentence that term well prepare me for, which you probably wouldn't use in any other context. I'd probably use at least once a cover letter because it's a really good active way to say, this experience makes me a good fit. So this experience well prepares me for this. And then the last paragraph talks about her interest in them. So not only does the theater do good work, but also I'm really invested in the work of this playwright. I've actually worked on one of his shows before, and I actually won an award for that work. And I'm really excited to join both your theater and be in this show. And then there's the thank you line, and then the signature. So a really standard, straightforward, strong cover letter there.